It's a sunny day, a little cool, but sunny day in February. I want to do some things in the garden, so come on. Sometimes you just want to do something in the garden. So today that's what we're going to do. Also, I want to show you a few updates on some things. First off, we're going to go cut some foliage off of the hellebore. This part of the garden has a handful of kind of older hellebores in it. So I've noticed we've got new growth popping up for quite a while. So I thought this was a good time to cut the foliage off. By the way, I get a lot of questions about the leaves here. Generally, these leaves break down, but I will, loosen things up a little bit in spring. I rarely remove them, but sometimes I do have to sort of uncover plants. So this job really couldn't be any easier, but if you scrape away inside of here, you can see all these little new growth tips coming up. Now, if it's going to get really cold, this foliage can protect the plants, but we don't have anything like that in our forecast for quite some time here. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip these all off right at the base. This is basically just to get this foliage out of here so that you can really enjoy the plants when they're flowering, and then of course they'll put up new foliage. If you don't do this for some reason, you can always do it later. It's just a little easier to get in here now before all these things are flowering. Okay, so that's what it looks like when it's all cleared out. You can see all this new growth. Now what I'm going to do right now is just take some of this, some of these leaves and just kind of throw it right over the top over there. Just a little bit of protection. They're naked now. The foliage is nice that it sticks up because otherwise I'd never be able to tell where they are in these gardens with all these leaves here. Let's get in here on this one. There we go. Look, that's pretty exciting. Look at those guys coming up. All right, well, that's almost embarrassing to call that a job. But there are things to talk to you about over here. So remember the bulb lawn that we planted in fall? Well, I have very good news for you. Do you see? All along here, it's probably very hard to see in the camera. Let's go up here in the sun. Little snowdrops are popping up all over the mound. This is extraordinarily early. I've never seen a bulb of any kind flowering in my garden in February, much less early February. But there's a couple of things going on here. One, this is the septic mound. It probably does stay a little warmer soil temperature wise than some other areas of the garden. So I think that's probably part of it. Two, these were all newly planted, and a lot of times, new bulbs have a lot of vigor in them, and perhaps that's the case here. There's no sign of anything else really popping up yet that I've seen, so the next thing I would expect, well, there is some winter aconite in here. No sign of those that I can see, although I don't want to tromp all over this. And probably the next thing after that might be like Iris reticulata. No sign of any of those things, only the snowdrops. So that is very exciting. Now I want to show you something that's been happening in the vegetable garden. I've grown in this vegetable garden now for 6 years. I have a whole video about how we created it, the size of it, all the details about it. So I'll link to that so you can catch up there if you want. But we had 6 growing seasons in this garden. And I noticed at the end of last season, I was starting to see some rot in the tops of boards here. Now, I don't think that's very surprising. We built this with a bottom course of cedar, and everything else was untreated pine. So this is not treated pine, it's untreated pine. Now, we chose to go with untreated pine primarily because I was concerned a little bit about the chemicals used to treat pine. I mean, honestly, I think that was a little overblown, perhaps. But if you're going to grow organic vegetables, I figured, well, why not just, not introduce that. That was my thought on. I'm not sure I'd make that same decision again, to be honest. But what we noticed was many of the boards, particularly on the north sides of the beds, were rotted out on top. So we decided to go in, I decided to do it, but it's Mr. Much More Patient who's been doing it, while the beds are frozen, because that way you're not disturbing the soil. So on most of them, the top boards that we've replaced have already been done. We didn't replace all of them. We did pretty much all the ones on the north side, but some of the beds needed more done. You can see this is one that has not been replaced because it's actually still plenty solid, but some of the other ones in this bed were not in good shape. So here's sort of an in-process view, so you can see that we've taken off this top board, and you can see that the soil is, well, see, it's thawing. As soon as we take it off, it's thawing, but the top edge has been mostly frozen, so it's easy to do. Now, the rot didn't stop there. You can see that the rot did go down into, I mean, this board is really soft right here, but we kind of made the decision to just fix the top boards where needed and leave it at that. This back bed, which is, was probably the worst, all of the boards on this one on the top were shot, so we had to redo this one. And you can see we still have to pick up one more board to finish things off here, but you can see that this one, and you can see again the rot. Well, this one's not so bad, but there's some soft spots in there to be sure. Now, I did slap a coat of stain on the new boards. You can kind of see, this one we actually did 2 layers on this side on the new boards just to get something on them. I will come back and stain all the beds again, but I just thought I'd get 1 coat of stain on. For whatever reason, the stain did not cover super well, but I also didn't sand the boards at all. So they had, what do they call that, mill sheen or whatever on them. So it probably would have gone on better had I sanded them first, but I was not going to mess around with that. So the reason we only did the top boards instead of replacing any, keep going down, one of the reasons was because of the way we built this. We did this with sort of, the butt ends alternate. So you would have to, in order to get to the next layer, you have to take off the whole top layer. So once you go past the top layer, it gets a little bit more complicated. 2, I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't, persistent throughout many of the boards. And I can see a scenario where we would just end up rebuilding everything. I think these beds have, even though there's some rot in there, I think they have a lot of life left in them. I think seeing this, I hope I don't live to regret this, but I would think that we can get another, hopefully 4 years out of these beds. I mean, I think we could get a total of 10 years out of straight pine beds before we would look at essentially rebuilding them. I will say this has been a great winter to do this because the ground is frozen, but we've not had snow and it's not terribly cold outside, so it's workable. So it's really important to do this when that soil is frozen so that you can build up the beds around it. There were a couple of reasons why we did not go with all cedar on these beds. Certainly, probably the primary one was cost. I mean, the additional cost for cedar over pine is huge, at least it was when we built these beds. The other thing is that we had used cedar posts in our old raised bed. And when we dismantled that bed, the cedar was just as rotted as the pine was. And I just think that I didn't see how that was going to be worth it. So I have no idea what the bottom layer is going to look like on this when we do take these apart. But I think we've got a lot of years left in them, even though we are starting to see definitely some rot coming in from the top. The rest of the garden is looking good. There's big fat buds on things. Things are generally looking really good. Listen, I'm not going to get ahead of myself here. Winter is far from over here. And I'm not going to get fooled into thinking that it's not. But it's nice to crank out some of these small projects that we can take care of when we're not so busy with everything else.